WQAD News 8, this is WQAD This Week.
Good morning. It's Sunday, May 21st. Thank you for joining us for News 8 This Week. I'm Josh Lamberty. John has this morning off. This week, our program focuses on what you might call sports tourism here in the Quad Cities region. Over the years, our area has served as a hub for both traditional sports and those gaining popularity. We have a lot to get to this morning, but first, to give you an idea of what we're talking about, John Diaz takes us to a recent tournament at the TBK Bank Sports Complex that drew thousands from across the Midwest.
From the sky, you can see why the TBK Bank Sports Complex might be an attractive option for athletes whose feet make moves on the turf. Busy parents have seen it all, along with their young athletes.
We travel all over the Midwest, and quite honestly, this is one of the better complexes we ever go to.
But where they play is only part of the story. Convenience is a key player.
In previous years, we rarely stayed in the site where we played. We were usually a 20 to 30 minute road trip in, after making the trip from central Iowa to the eastern part of the state.
Think about where all the goal kicks are going.
That's why this girls' soccer tournament, which for the past 16 years has been in Burlington, this year was held in Bettendorf.
We have 41 teams here from Kansas, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, and Wisconsin.
Organizer Eric Stratman started looking around after he watched room and transportation costs drive teams from his tournament.
I was starting to have teams say, we can't make that commitment anymore to come, and so that's why we had to look at a different option.
Nearby hotels and easy booking have helped make this Quad City complex score some extra points.
I actually booked a hotel block for our team, and we had no problem at all whatsoever getting the hotels. We had a great rate, and the hotel's beautiful.
Parents say the added bonus, a sense of community, miles away from home.
A lot of families will use this as an opportunity to bond themselves, and so now they're not scattered all over hotels around the area. They're going to be centralized or localized in one place.
In Bettendorf, John Diaz, WQAD News 8.
Joining us now is Dave Herrell. He's the president and CEO of Visit Quad Cities. Dave, thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about sports tourism, but we want to start by taking a little bit of a look back. Tell us a little bit, maybe like the past, 10, 20 years or so of how sports tourism really came to be in the Quad Cities.
Well, I think it started with some vision. I think at the time, my predecessor, Joe Taylor, and the team really decided that we needed to jump into this space. It was something that a lot of communities around the United States were focusing a lot of energy and time and effort into, and we weren't. And so that was really the impetus of creating the Quad Cities Sports Commission, which now operates as Sports QC. And so it started there. I think that that jumping off point has been a good evolution for us as we want to think about what does this space look like as it relates to tourism? How are we operating? How are we competing? How are we positioning the Quad Cities to be relevant within the sports tourism world? And it's not an easy thing, so you need some real deliberate approaches if you're going to be successful. And I think over the last decade, we've been able to see some tremendous momentum, some ups and downs. I think we
As
know,
with anything.
Yeah, and I think we know kind of who we are. Now it's about like what's the next 15, 20 years look like.
And it's really kind of become a hub here for sports and sports tourism. How did that transition and evolution really happen?
Well, I think a couple things. I think the bones and the structure that we have in the Quad Cities, they lend well for hosting events, and particularly sporting events. The fact that there's 37 million people here within like a 6-hour radius point of the Quad Cities, helps that we are a drive-to market, I think bodes well for the Quad Cities. We've had facilities, coming online like TBK Bank Sports Complex and others, and I think that has helped position us as it relates to being, really relevant within the youth and amateur and collegiate, space.
So it sounds like we're growing. It sounds like we're doing well. How well are we doing, and can we really compete with other markets like a Des Moines or Chicago or some of these bigger, more established sports scenes?
Well, I think for us, you want to benchmark other communities, but you want to be who you are.
Sure.
And so a high concentration on that makes a lot of sense. And so we have a 5-year strategy that we launched literally right before the pandemic. So we've kind of been adjusting there, and that's specific to sports. We have our tourism master plan, but within that, we have a sports tourism specific plan. And so that really is the guidepost for us.
Let's talk about maybe something a little closer to us in the near term. RAGBRAI is a big deal coming to Davenport and the Quad Cities. Talk a little bit about the impact that that's going to have here in our region. I know you've been busy in the planning process, and really what's next to kind of get us to that big day in July?
Well, there's two things. I think if you look at like over the next couple months, I think one, we're hosting the NAIA Women's Golf Championship at TPC Deer Run, the first time ever in the history of our community to host that. So what a great opportunity to showcase the QC to those athletes. And then we'll really transition out of that within the sports world and in our world and focus on RAGBRAI. So 50 different states, 17 different foreign countries. Right now there's going to be well over 25,000 participants. And so there's a lot of planning and execution that goes into that. We have this theme of, be bold, ride gold, and that's to celebrate the 50th. So everything that we can do to kind of goldify the Quad Cities, we want to do it. But there's a lot of moving parts with it, whether it's public safety to infrastructure to transportation to communication to event management to all of the things that go into hosting an event of this magnitude. And literally, we've been working on it since we found out in January, but quite frankly, the planning went in a while back. And so if you look at July to be able to host the Quad City Bix Times, Bix 7, and then RAGBRAI that same day, not a lot of communities can boast that. So how are we leveraging that? How are we building a platform to really put the Quad Cities on a pedestal that we want it to be?
And when you look at everything as a whole, sports world here in the QC, what are you finding are the biggest challenges?
Well, I think there's a few. I think one, how are we investing in sports tourism, okay? If you look at what TBK Bank Sports Complex has done, like an amazing, private investor, Doug Kratz, came in and made that venue a reality. And so, a few years later, look at the fruits that we've been able to generate. Sports tourism is about a $60 million economic impact on the Quad Cities on an annualized basis.
That's a lot.
And so if you look at TBK Bank Sports Complex, look at Vibrant Arena, look at all of the things. Bend Expo hosted the American Cornhole League Championship. So you got to have investment. You have to have a good private-public partnership to be able to pull these things off. You also have to invest in destination marketing and content. So in what we do at Sports QC, we're essentially investing in content to try to get it here. So one, you got to have a great market, okay? So the destination has to be strong. Two, you have to have the right portfolio of venue assets to be able to host those events. And three, how are you investing in those to be able to, one, attract them, but two, they all require a level of commitment to a rights holder to be able to get them into your market in the first place. And it's a hyper-competitive space. So there are literally destinations all throughout Illinois, all throughout Iowa, all throughout the Midwest that we are competing with every day on thousands of events. So if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a strategy, you're going to be behind the eight ball.
We started our conversation asking to take a look back. If you had to look maybe in the next decade forward, what does sports tourism in the QCA look like?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, how do we round out, youth and amateur, sporting events even further? I think TBK has been a prime example of what, that asset has meant to events coming in. And if you look at where that audience is, like Chicago suburbs, all throughout the Midwest. So what does youth and amateur look like? What does collegiate look like? I think there's still this untapped market for incremental NCAA events and also NJCAA events too that I think we can pursue with our partners at Blackhawk College.
Yeah.
Also outdoor. How does outdoor and maybe these non-traditional emerging sports, what does that look like? A prime example would be gravel cycling. So we've kind of started scratching the surface on that. And so, if you look at those three components, but then a big focus and intentionality for us at Visit Quad Cities and our Sports QC initiative is female athletics and concentrating on female student athletes. So events like the Missouri Valley Women's Basketball Tournament,
yes.
NAIA Women's Basketball, how can we continue to put some emphasis in that? And if we can do that and make sure that we're putting some, real harnessed energy behind that, then I think we're going to be successful, and I think we'll be competitive.
Certainly an exciting time to be an athlete and at least involved in the sports world here in the Quad Cities. Dave Herrell, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us.